My name is Harriet Morton Weicht. I grew up on the Hercules camp. I have two of my brothers with me today who also grew up mostly on the Hercules camp. And this is my oldest and dearest friend. Her name is Carol Grace Reffett. Her father, Thomas Grace, worked for Hercules right after it had started. And we have a couple of pictures that you might be interested in seeing that I had blown up. This is a picture of all the original people, men, that worked for Hercules. Hercules began here in Zephyrhills in 1946, September of 46, and this picture was taken January of 47. At least that's what my mama wrote at the top of it, so I'm pretty sure that's right. If you know anybody that knows someone that worked for them, there's still a few of the old timers around. If you could do anything to help us identify them, we'd really appreciate it because there aren't too many of them that we're seeing. I found out today that Reggie Roberts' great-grandfather also worked for Hercules. His name was Rufus Riley. Yeah, and so I gave him a copy of this picture, and he's going to see if his mom can identify his grandfather in it. Thomas, no, her dad started with Hercules not long after that picture was taken. And many of you are familiar with the new Wawa that's coming to town and the Culvers that's also coming to Zephyrhills. I've had very mixed feelings about it, and I've been very angry that that's happened, but I have to tell you, I think God just gave me this little whisper in my ear yesterday. One of the best things about Hercules being in Zephyrhills is that it provided a lot of jobs for a lot of people, black and white, in our community. They had wonderful benefits. They had stock options if you wanted to get into that. They had a really good retirement for their employees. They provided housing, which was on what we call the Hercules camp. That's where Wawa and Culver's are now. And I was thinking yesterday with this little thought that popped in my head, Culver's and Wawa are also going to provide a lot of jobs for our community. So I have to think of the good parts of it. There's nothing we can change. It's already done. So if it helps families like Hercules help families, it'll be a good thing in the end. This picture that Carol's going to hold for us is, she has an aerial view of the Hercules property. It was 80 acres. It extended from Highway 301 on the west side all the way over to 12th Street on the east side. Zephyrhills High School is there now. Woodland Elementary is there now. I taught 38 years, retired from Woodland. So I basically grew up on that property, worked on that property, and maybe I'll go back one day and die on that property, I don't know. Anyway, this aerial view shows a picture, and I'll put them out, so if you want to take a close look later, you're more than welcome to. On this side is a building. It was the commissary, the company commissary. People could purchase their groceries there and other kinds of goods. As we got a little bit older as a teenager, that part had closed down. They weren't operating the commissary anymore. And then there's a building over here on this side, which is the mechanics building. Carol's dad was one of the mechanics there, could fix anything. After he retired, some of you might have had him fixing your washing machine. He did that, yes. And then in the middle is what we call the pump shed. And that there was a big well there, and it pumped water to all the houses. My house was way up by 301. And I will tell you at night that we didn't have much water pressure when everybody was taking baths. We either got it real early or we waited and got it real late in order to have enough. That pump shed was still on the Woodland property when I retired in 2008. They used to store a lot of PE equipment in there. A lot of people say, well, what is Hercules? What was it? It's actually, it originally was a part of DuPont Chemical Company. And there were some antitrust laws that were enacted against DuPont because they had bought up all their smaller competitors. And they had to, sell off some of their companies. And one of the things they did was they made Hercules a separate entity. There is a town in California called Hercules, California. And that's where the first Hercules company actually was. The headquarters for when my dad and her dad and everybody worked there was in Wilmington, Delaware. And it was after the antitrust episode went finished. In 1912, the actual Hercules Powder Company was started by a man named, I think Mr. Backus or Buckus, something like that. But in the information that I was reading about the company, it seems the DuPonts always had their fingers in the Hercules pie. We always thought they were big competitors. Not really. Once they had broken away from DuPont had much of their original administration staff transferred to Hercules. So the people that used to run DuPont then were running Hercules. And they had a wonderful $5 million loan to help them get started. So they were a success right from the very beginning. The main thing they did was produce what they call naval stores, which is the turpentine and the tar products and pine things like that. But then they also went into dynamite, later TNT. My husband and I meant to bring it. He purchased me this big wooden box that Hercules explosives were originally packed in. And of course we forgot to bring that today. And I have a small little red metal box that the dynamite caps were put in, the munition caps. As I was reading, I found out that Hercules was responsible for the first smokeless gunpowder. So it was used with shotguns and handguns and rifles and things like that, where before it was all black powder, and you can imagine what that was like, or if you've seen old movies, you sort of know. It was really, in 1916, Hercules got a huge contract with Great Britain, and it helped them to become very successful. They wanted them to make a particular product for their shipping industry, and they didn't want to know where they got the resources for it. But Hercules actually sent ships to the Pacific, and they got giant kelp, and that was like the base of this, like an adhesive product for the ships, a type of chemical that they had. I'll tell you a little bit about growing up with it. Oh, and one more thing. Later, they also diversified again, and some of the rocket fuel boosters for NASA were actually made by Hercules. Growing up, it was a whole different experience. A lot of people have talked to you about what it's like to grow up in Zephyrhills. Well, we had it like double, because not only was Zephyrhills a wonderful town to be in, but growing up on the Hercules property was special. It was like you had this great big family. And if you were naughty, you better believe your parents were going to know about it in just a few minutes, because everybody would tell each other. One of the things is that when this land was purchased, it was during the time of segregation. Our homes were on the west side of the commissary, and that was whites. And on the other side, on the east side of the commissary, where the high school is actually located now, was the black section where the blacks lived. Blacks in Zephyrhills at that particular time were bused to Dade City to go to school. I used to teach fourth grade, and I would tell my little fourth graders that, and they were astonished. They couldn't believe, that there were white fountains, white bathrooms, black fountains, sometimes black bathrooms, not always. And so for them, that was just a concept that was very hard to grasp. I have felt very close to so many of the people on the Hercules camp, no matter what color they were. Reggie and I, we have a special bond. He grew up with our children. And then I found out just today about his great-grandfather working for Hercules. What else do we want to tell them? Well, sometimes you could be real naughty, but you had to hide so the other people at Hercules wouldn't tell. One day, Carol, this is kind of a funny story, but it's embarrassing for my grandson to hear this. Her dad was sitting on the back porch, and he was smoking a cigarette. And when he got done, he flicked it out in the yard. We were in third grade. We watched her daddy. He went in the house. We ran over. We didn't go slow. We ran. Picked up that cigarette and went and hid behind one of the pine trees and had our first little puff. It almost killed us when we did that. No, and we never smoked in our lives. I mean, we weren't adults that ever took up the smoking habit. When we were in the 10th grade, Hercules had just been sold to the school board. And they were just starting to disband, from the area. But we were allowed to have our 10th grade float in the mechanics garage because it wasn't being used anymore. And that was great because you could lock the doors and cover the windows, and the other classes that were in competition for the homecoming float didn't know what your float looked like till the last minute. So we thought we were hot stuff, having a special place to make our float. This was short and sweet. I had some notes that, it's probably just boring stuff. It was mostly about the chemicals and different things that they did. But it was a very special time and a very special place to grow up.